Okay, hello Cloud Gurus and welcome to this lecture. In this lecture we're going to look at security groups. So this is a lab and you will need to log into the AWS console. Okay, so here I am in the AWS console. We're going to go to EC2, which is under compute. And we're going to click in here and we'll be able to see our instance. Now, if we click on our instance and grab our public IP address, we can go ahead and load our web page. So I want you to navigate over to your public IP address and load your web page. Okay, so here I am in my browser. I'm just going to paste it in here, and you can see straight away it says Hello Cloud Gurus. So if I go back over to EC2, just going to maximize the screen. So the reason we're able to browse to our web page is we've enabled port 80 on our security group, and port 80 is just the HTTP port. And you can see your security groups just by scrolling down here. There's always going to be in the description. So here's my security group here. I can actually click in here and view my inbound rules. And we can see here that port 80 and port 22 are open to the world. And that my security group is called WebDMZ. So let's go over and edit our security groups. So it's here under Network and Security. You can see security groups. And in here, you're able to create security groups, delete security groups, edit security groups, etc. So we go over to our WebDMZ. I'll just make this a little bit bigger so we can all see. So we've got our description in here, and it's basically just the name of our security group, the ID of it, and then the description, and then which VPC it's in. And then if we click in here, we've got our inbound rules. So we've opened up HTTP on port 80, and we've done this to 0.0.0.0/0. So this is IPv4. We've also done it on IPv6, and we've also done SSH on port 22 to IPv4. So if I go ahead and delete this rule, what if I go in and edit and delete my two port 80 rules and hit save? What do you think is going to happen? How quickly do you think this is going to take effect? If I go back over to my browser, if I click in here and hit refresh, and you can see down here it says connecting, it's going to hang for about a minute and then it's going to time out. So every time you make a rule change on a security group, that change takes effect immediately. And that can be a really popular exam question going into your exams. So that took just over 60 seconds, but you can now see that it has timed out. So by deleting that rule in the security group, the change took effect immediately and I now cannot access the website. If I go back to the AWS Management Console, I can go in here and I can go add rule. And we're going to go in and add HTTP. And we're going to do it for port 80. And by default, we're going to open it up to both IPv4 and IPv6 and hit save. And if we scroll down, we can now see that that rule has taken effect on our WebDMZ. Sorry, I'll just click in here. So you can see it in here now. I'll just full screen this so it's easier to see. So now you can see HTTP and HTTP on IPv4 and IPv6. And if I just go back over to my other browser, that is now loading immediately. So hello Cloud Gurus. So we've learned that if you make a change to a security group, that change takes effect immediately. Let's have a look at our outbound rules. So in here, we've got an outbound rule over all traffic, protocol for everything, port for everything, destination to everything. What would happen if we go and delete this? Would that delete all our outbound traffic? Would we suddenly be able to send a request to our EC2 instance, but nothing will then come back out? Let's go ahead and test that. I'll just come out of full screen, and in here, if I hit refresh, and you can see that it loads immediately. So by deleting that rule, nothing happened. And the reason for that is security groups are stateful. So essentially, when you create an inbound rule, an outbound rule is created automatically. So if you allow HTTP in, it's automatically allowed out as well. If you allow RDP in, or if you allow SSH, or you allow MySQL in, it's automatically going to be allowed back out. Now, when we get to the VPC section of the course, you're going to learn about network access control lists, or NACLs as we like to call them, and those are stateless. So when you create an inbound rule, you also have to create an outbound rule as well. So with security groups are stateful, network access control lists are stateless, and that's something we'll learn again in the VPC section of the course. Also, I want you to have a look in here. If I go to edit and I go to add a rule, there's no way I can add rules all I want. I can allow, traffic over Oracle RDS or Redshift or, SMTPS, whatever port it is, I can allow, but I can't actually go in and block an individual port. I can't go in and say, hey, don't allow any traffic across this. There's no way of blacklisting a particular port. And likewise, there's no way of blacklisting a particular IP address. You can't do that with security groups. Where you can do that is with network access control lists. And again, we're going to look at that in the VPC section of the course. But for now, what's really important is just to remember that you can't block individual IP addresses using security groups, and you can't block an individual port. But the way security groups work, right, is when you create a security group, everything's blocked by default. You have to go in and allow something. So everything's blocked by default, but when you go in and allow HTTP or MySQL, then the traffic is allowed through. So that's another thing to take away going into your exam. So I'm just going to close this and go ahead and hit save. Next thing we're going to do is just go over to our default security group. And what I'm going to do in here is I'm going to add some inbound rules. So let's go and add MySQL, for example. So we'll scroll down, MySQL Aurora, so 3306. And let's add SQL Server, which will be 1433. So if we find a SQL Server, just right here, MS SQL, and so 1433, there you go. Go ahead and hit save. And then it's just giving me saying that I need to enter in a CIDR address range. So if I put o.o.o.o/o and o.o.o.o/o, and there we go. I'm going to go ahead and hit save. And that has now allowed MySQL and MS SQL through our default security group. Now, if we go back to EC2 and click on our running instances, you can see in here that we've only got one security group attached to this EC2 instance. You can attach more than one security group to an EC2 instance. The way you do that is you just click on Actions and you go over to Networking. And here you go Change Security Groups. And we can go ahead in here and click Assign security groups, and we now have two security groups assigned to our EC2 instance. So we've got our default one as well as our WebDMZ. If we click on View Inbound Rules, this actually looks a little bit better now because we can actually see which ports are open by which security groups. So we're saying here that WebDMZ is allowing port 80 and port 22, and our default is allowing port 1433 as well as 3306. So it's allowing MySQL in as well. So that's how we can add and remove security groups. And of course, if you add a security group to an EC2 instance, that effect takes place immediately. So I'm just going to go in and I'm going to just clean up. I'm going to go back to my security groups and I'm going to delete I'm not going to delete my default one, but I am going to delete those rules that we just created because you really don't want MySQL and SQL Server access open to the entire world. It's not a very good security practice. And the next thing I'm going to do is just go back over to EC2 and I'm going to remove that security group. So if I go to Actions and then go over to Networking and change security groups, I'm just going to remove the default one and make sure that it's still in the WebDMZ. So let's go have a look at my exam tips. So onto my exam tips. Just remember that all inbound traffic is blocked by default. So you have to go into a security group and enable it. So we went in and enabled port 80, we enabled port 22, SSH, we enabled MySQL, etc., etc. So you all inbound traffic is blocked by default, but then you can go in and enable individual ports. Remember that all outbound traffic is allowed. So even if we went in and deleted that rule, it has no effect on a security group whatsoever. And the reason for that is security groups are stateful, which we're about to come up to. Changes to security groups take effect immediately. So as soon as we deleted port 80, we could no longer access our website. As soon as we added it again, we could. You can have any number of EC2 instances within a single security group, and you can also have multiple security groups attached to EC2 instances. So there is not a one-on-one relationship at all. You can have as many EC2 instances within an individual security group as you want, and likewise, you can have multiple security groups attached to individual EC2 instances. We learned that security groups are stateful, so we don't have to change inbound and outbound ports. If you enable something on the inbound, outbound is enabled automatically for that port. And if you create an inbound rule allowing traffic in, which is exactly what I just said, that traffic is automatically allowed back out again. And you cannot block specific IP addresses using security groups. Instead, you're going to do this using network access control lists, and we're going to learn all about that in the VPC section of the course. And then finally, you can specifically allow rules, but you cannot set any deny rules in a security group. So if you see any scenario questions about setting up a deny rule on a security groups don't work like that. By default, they deny everything, but then you go in and allow. You can't put a specific deny rule on a security group, but you can do that with network access control lists. And like I said, we will cover that off in the VPC section of the course. So that is it for this lecture, guys. If you have any questions, please let me know. If not, feel free to move on to the next lecture where we're going to look at EBS volumes. So if you've got the time, please join me in the next lecture. Thank you.